Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another Tuesday discussion. Here on Tuesdays, we do like to give video responses to questions or comments we're either getting on Instagram, YouTube, or from our wonderful Patreon community. Thank you so much for everything over the course of the last week. I cannot wait until these things get in your hands and get to hear all your feedback. But thank you. Thank you so much. Now, with that in mind, what we did over the last week is we did drop 4 single barrels, 3 from Backbone in collaboration with Dusty Dan, Drifting Drams, Whiskey Uncensored, and Chris over at Bourbon of the Week. And we also dropped a Blue Note with Dusty Dan, Drifting Drams, and Jason at the Mash and Drum. So wonderful times on those. Those were actually picked months apart, but they happened to fall on the same weekend, which just generated a whole lot of questions from people. Now, one of the ones I wanted to focus on for today, based on some of the questions I was getting, is the Blue Note Juke Joint. So what we're going to cover in this video is just going to be the background of what went on, why we picked it, what's the backstory, why did we go there, and one of the things that people were particularly interested in were tasting notes. So I got quite a few comments asking for tasting notes. I tried to respond and paste some things in the comments, but it's going to be more fun to talk about it and drink the whiskey with you. So this also serves as a video for anyone that buys this over on Shared Pour. As of recording, this is still available. I'll put the link in the description, but this is like the companion video if you buy the bottle, to also come back and check out the tasting notes and drink it with me as we go. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Hey, let's kick off the show. All right. So I got this all poured out in my Whiskey Nose Golden Glen. Cheers, Marty. Let's pull up here. I'm going to pull up some of the questions that I got. One of them was, why did we choose Blue Note for this pick? So there's actually a couple different reasons there. If you're not familiar with these Blue Note Juke Joint picks, man, they have been killer over the last 2 years. Man, maybe 3 years now. I have been loving these things. And where they're sourcing from mostly is Green River. They don't hide that either. They are very open about that fact. And the fact that they jumped on the Green River bandwagon so early is to their credit. That is fabulous distillate. We've talked about Green River quite a few times over the course of this year. So Blue Note does represent somewhere that we can get a cask strength Green River, which is wonderful because we love Green River. The other thing that is really nice about these is that they are at an affordable price. This one is $54.99, which is the typical price for these Blue Note picks. So keep that in mind as you go through those two. Just like Green River themselves, these are very affordable at cask strength. So that's always very attractive. The other reason, and this leads into the name. So the name behind this one, and I'm going to hit on this point a few times because that was a question that I got. This is called the Sublime Encore. And there's a whole bunch of hidden meanings behind that name. But the encore part of that name is because we have done a pick at Blue Note before. So this was actually the first Hello Again Whiskey Friend barrel pick. It was picked by Kelsey and the Turks, Katie and Ethan, Drifting Drams. And they ended up finding a short barrel at Blue Note. It only yielded like 30 bottles. So we're talking about a dark, concentrated beast when we're talking about this bottle. And they went there, they picked it, they got all the bottles, and that would then be the first Hello Again Whiskey Friend barrel pick. Of course, not too many people have that. There were only 30 bottles. So it deserved an encore. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to go to Blue Note. And we all wanted to go to Blue Note together. So Darrell, Kelsey, I, and the Turks. We also had Dusty Dan and Jason at the Mash and Drum there. And we got to pick a barrel together to kind of relive that experience and to complete the cycle on this original pick. The other reason that it's called the Sublime Encore, you're going to hear me get into it in the tasting notes a few times. There is a very interesting tart note on this whiskey that I love, and you'll get to see how that's interpreted as we go through the tasting notes. But also, the entire weekend, we called it Turkapalooza. And what we did there was I actually brought my Rock Band kit from 2008, circa 2008, maybe even older than that, not to age myself here. But I hadn't played Rock Band on the Xbox forever, so I downloaded Rock Band 4, all the downloadable tracks. If you're not familiar with Rock Band, it's essentially karaoke with plastic instruments, and it was glorious. And one of the songs that we played was Sublime. They have a couple different Sublime songs on there. So another reason why it's called the Sublime Encore, and a lot of the components of the sticker are kind of based on being at a concert and Sublime and all that kind of stuff. But that's the Turkapalooza, the Sublime Encore. Lots of fun memories. Hopefully we can keep bringing fun memories when it comes to the inspiration behind these. So now let's get into the tasting notes in and of themselves here. I'm going to go through the nose, the palate, and the finish. Now I'm just going to concentrate on the tasting notes. There is no sense in like reviewing something that we picked. I mean, either we're going to be in our heads and underscore it, or we're going to overscore it and it's going to look bad. So there is no scoring a whiskey that you picked, but we picked it. So of course we like it and we're proud of it. One thing I will say within that, if you pay attention to the channel and the way that we do reviews, you know that we focus quite a bit on the experience of a whiskey. That actually is a bigger component of the final scores than even the flavors. So we concentrate on things like mouthfeel, the complexity of the flavors, the transition of the flavors, the complexity of the nose, the length of the finish, all of those different things. Is it giving you flavors through and through? We're looking for those type of experience elements versus necessarily the flavor notes themselves, which can be more subjective. But when you're looking at the experience, there's a little less subjectivity there. And we pretty much expect in everything that we're going to pick here to be rich, to be oily, to have a good mouthfeel, to be complex, to have good transitions, to give flavor throughout, and to have a long finish. So that's just going to be the baseline. Then it's just a matter of the flavors from there. All right, no more talking. Let's get into this thing. Cheers, everybody. And remember, if you did buy this, come back to this video and taste it along with me and let me know what you think of these tasting notes. So now starting on the nose, I actually wrote these down because this is actually exciting. I don't have to like taste it live and just talk about it. I actually just get to explain it. But let's get into that one. You'll see the tasting notes on the side, but I'm still going to sniff it through it anyway. So yeah, the main thing that's going to jump out to me on this one is this, this buttery pie crust. It comes again and again. It's just filled with all these baking spices. I get a little bit of white pepper too. So there's just this whole bunch of pantry spices going on. And the main note though on the nose is that pie crust. There is a tartness that goes on behind the scenes. It is not as predominant on the nose as it's going to be on the taste. But those are the main elements of this nose. And I interpret that more, all those baking spice elements, all that sugariness into just sort of a buttery pie crust. Oh, man. So let's get into the palate here. Cheers, everybody. Rich and creamy up front. And if you let it sit on your tongue a little bit, initially it's just this really nice vanilla cream and some of those baking spices that I'm talking about. When you get to mid palate, this thing explodes. And that tart note actually becomes center stage quite a bit. Now, I interpret this as key lime cheesecake. So it's this combination between the lime flavoring, but the creaminess of a cheesecake all hitting you at once. It's not like in your face lime, it's more like a lime flavoring on something like a cheesecake. Still has that buttery crust element. and it is Green River distillate. So that cherry note is there too. For me, I imagine it more as a reduction kind of spread across the top of that cherry cheesecake. And you do get a good wave of those baking spices. I tend to put those side by side with that buttery crust. Let me go in one more sip, see if I find anything else to talk about. Oh, man. Can't wait to hear the reactions to that key lime pie note. I mean, it just hits, and it hits hard for me. I like it so much. Oh, man. I just keep going back to it. It's a very addicting note. So now let's get into the finish here. So I'll take another sip. Now, the transition from mid palate to the finish and the flavors, honestly, there's not too much of a transition in flavors. The key lime cheesecake is still absolutely center stage. The white pepper that I mentioned on the note comes back on the nose comes back, but the one thing that does emerge even more so is that creaminess that I noted up front. You know, it's almost like having a dollop of whipped cream on this whole pie that I'm imagining in my head. Because of course I have to imagine things as very complicated desserts. All right, let's go in for one more sip. Oh, I think that's it there. You know, that cherry note hangs into the finish too. I didn't have that one on the slide, but you can still get that cherry note towards the finish. Gosh, this thing is just so rich and oily. Mm. Excited to hear reactions to this one. Now, I will say on this one, I had some discussions on this one and was having a tasting with a Scotch friend over the weekend, and he's like, "Hey, you should explore that one with water." Just based on how I was talking about it, he didn't sip on it yet. He's like, "You should be exploring that one with water, just the way that you're describing it. I bet you it will bloom if you put a few drops in it." So that is going to be another tip for anyone that buys this. I don't do this very often. We did this recently with the New Riff Sherry finish, where I put a few drops of water in it. I'm just going to add two based on how much I have in the glass right now. But I would recommend probably 3 drops to a 1 ounce glass. It is so rich and oily that it's actually going to bring out those oils even further. And let's see if I have the same reaction that I did earlier. But I thought what it did on the finish with just a few drops of waters actually improved the experience and the flavors of it. So that's kind of an interesting thing. You know, I don't explore with water too much, but hey, you get that tip, you got to experiment, and then to find out, hey, it's actually surprising. Cheers, everybody. This is with 2 drops of water, just in about a half ounce, 3/4 of an ounce. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. The finish blooms. It's kind of amazing what that does with some water. Totally interested to hear other reactions on that. The generally saying the flavor notes are the same, but the way that it hits the palate and transitions from mid palate into the finish is totally different. With a few drops of water, it kind of brings down the key lime notes that I talk about and brings out more of this rich buttercream and the cheesecake elements more so than the flavoring. But oh my gosh, just the way that it blossoms right there on the finish. One more sip. Ah. So if you, oh man, that's really good. If you have the bottle, I do want you to come back to this video, watch this, taste it along with me, and let me know what you're getting too. I'm very interested in your experience and if you are getting the same interpretation to me. If you're getting a different interpretation, leave that in the comments as well. If you like this format, we can also do this to the other picks. Though, once again, anything that's sold out, those will be Patreon only videos, working with Kelsey and Darrell to do those on a couple of the backbones. So thank you for joining me today, Whiskey Friends. Let me know what you think of this format too. I know it's kind of weird to taste through your own pick, but you get so many questions about it. I think it's easier to put it all in one space. Let me know if you like this or not, and I'll catch you on the next Tuesday discussion. Goodbye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again.